Senator Durbin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for joining us. I've listened to the line of questioning from Senator Rockefeller, Senator Bayh, and others, and I'd like to ask you, it seems to be very apparent to us as we review the capabilities of the agencies that are tasked with gathering intelligence that there is a wide disparity in their information technology and capability. I would say that the FBI is barely out of the Stone Age in terms of computer capability. Other agencies, apparently National Security Agency and others, are very, very sophisticated. I'd like to ask General Scowcroft and Mr. Berger, under your watch, who had the responsibility of oversight on something as basic as the information technology of each of these agencies and their physical ability to gather, review, coordinate, and share information?
That's a very good question, Senator, and I think the answer is it depends on the particular intelligence agency and who it belongs to. And in many cases, there is divided responsibility, and what has really happened is each one of the individual components has built their own system. And in many cases, the systems can't talk to each other.
Were you aware of that?
Yes.
And were any efforts made under your watch to address that?
Yes, and there has been some progress made in combining systems or in putting what I would call an interpreter, an electronic interpreter, to allow the search to go on. But there's no enthusiasm in many cases to share this data. Each one likes to keep the family jewels.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
So
I was afraid it wasn't just a matter of a breakdown of computer architecture, but really was a mindset that basically said, well, why would we want to talk to those people?
That is some part of the problem, and this is a subset of the larger problem that I think that Senator Rockefeller brought.
Thank you. Mr. Berger, would you address that as well?
Senator, in some cases, this is a matter of a collective priority or a matter of priority for the President or for the National Security Advisor. Early on in our administration, for example, it was the judgment of the then DCI that our satellite infrastructure was woefully inadequate and that we had to make major investments to deal with the information technology, communications technology revolution. And so in the early 90s, we spent more money on satellites. That was something we shared, an overall assessment that was done with the Congress.
Who had the corporate responsibility of directing that discussion?
Well, there was enough money involved that was a matter that this committee was seized with, both committees, as well as Office of Management budget and the overall budgeting process. This was a big chunk of money to rebuild update our satellite system. So in some sense, it's a overall responsibility. I would say the day-to-day management systems within a particular agency are generally the responsibility of the head of the agency. Well, it's not possible from the NSC.
Well, Mr. Berger, the point I'm making is this. What they serve in the cafeteria at the FBI as opposed to the CIA is irrelevant. But their computer technologies and whether or not they are complementary and consistent with the architecture of computers at other intelligence agencies would seem to be a matter of national security. And when we find in our first oversight hearing of the FBI last year, the first one in I think 12 or 14 years, maybe longer, the primitive state of the art of computers at the FBI, it suggests no one was watching. Not just under your watch, but going back for the first computer.
Well, I mean, those budgets were increased substantially, and I think it'd be worth looking at what happened to that money. The CT budget in FBI, according to Director Free, increased 350%. So I think it's worth looking inside that and finding out what the allocation was.
But now we have.
But I would say there were efforts to increase coordination, and in particular, we energized a high-level senior group, the Counterterrorism Security Group. These were assistant secretaries for for counterterrorism and all the key agencies, they met 3, 4, sometimes every day to look at intelligence. Now, I think looking post 9/11, not everything was always provided to that central mechanism. So there has to be a willingness, this gets, I suppose, to culture, on the part of the agency.
I would.
To
I'm out of time.
To share that information.
I'm out of time, and I'll just close by saying
But
that
I agree with
I think this is emblematic of what the challenge is. If we do not have one person at the top of the heap somewhere near the White House, if not there, who is looking at something as basic as information technology at these agencies and saying they ought to be able to communicate with one another if they wanted to, how will we ever reach the point of having a conversation where they can meaningfully be told, now communicate? We seem to have lacked that in previous administrations, and if we're talking about reform and intelligence, I hope this is part of it.
I think some efforts were made, but I think more efforts need to be made, Senator, absolutely.